So let's try it again. So I wanted to show you guys the mind map. So we'll get that open. And we're also doing module 4, system administration tasks. Let's go ahead and get that open. And for virtual machines, I'm going to open up the Kali image. We're going to use that for today. Okay, start with the Kali image. Great. Looks like everything's loading. A-okay. All right. I know. One would think I'd actually be doing a Linux class using a Linux system, right? Would that make way too much sense? Don't worry, guys. I don't know how to do that. That's not in the brain dumps section, and I'm a brain dump for that. There we go. There we go. Okay, so might as well just start completely over here. Module 4, System Administration Tasks. Come on. All right. Try to anyway. So this is all about users and groups. Okay, so let's open up the mind map document. Let's get that one over here. That's still loading. And then the Linux certification tracks. I also wanted to show you guys this. So let's try to grab that. See how this is how it's supposed to work, guys. All right, so what I did is mapped the Cisco CCNA, CCNP, CCIE to the LPI track, to the CompTIA, to the SUSE, to the Novell, the different, they're sort of the same thing, versus Red Hat versus the other. And so what this class is designed to do is basically beat LPI 101 and 102. And there's agreements with LPI with the SUSE and CompTIA. So basically if you take the LPI 1 and 2 course, but take the CompTIA powered by LPI tests, then that qualifies you to get the SUSE administrative certifications. So I've got all of introduction level 1 here mapped out completely. Where at level 2, they actually have 2 courses for that as well, LPI 201 and 202, which is the equivalent of the Red Hat Certified Engineer or the Novell's Linux Engineer certifications. And then of course your advanced, this is the LPI 3C, where it goes into 301, 302, 303, 304, which is open LDAP, mixed environments, security, and high availability, which is kind of the equivalent of the expertise of the RHCA and RHCSS and RHCSD certifications, which are definitely advanced. All right, so there you go. That's a little overview of the certification track here. I threw that in this module as well. So keep that in mind. Now the next piece of this is to start looking about how the permissions work. And so I actually have the mind map software open. So let's start pulling out the mind map. I'd like to start doing the mind map piece of this first, if at all possible. That way I can give you guys a nice high-level summary of what we're going to cover, and then just show you the hands-on equivalent to actually what happens in that module, if you will. All right, so I'm going to switch over here to the PDF for fear that this software will run. Here it is. Might be just a little easier. All right, so the first piece of this, manage file and directory permissions. This is basically how to look at one half of the content in this section. So it's file and directory permissions, manage file permissions and ownership, and perform security administration tasks. And I've got down the different commands that go in each section. So if we kind of look here to manage file and permissions and ownership and dig into that piece of it first, and we'll start right here at the top. And then you'll see how this maps to the Word document too, because the same material in this mind map is realistically in the Word document. So the first piece of this is basically how Linux does its permissions. It basically does a read, a write, and an execute for user, group, and other. And it's once you get used to thinking in permissions in the way that Linux does, it's actually pretty easy and it actually makes sense. It's just getting to it the first time, just like the first time you did NTFS permissions for Windows. I'm sure you had to scratch your head and go, what is this, universal group or global group or things like that. So it takes a little bit to get used to, except it's not really that difficult. So basically what this looks like, it makes sense to convert it to binary because realistically it's just 3 placeholders. In the format of a 0 or 1, a 0, 1, or a 0, 1 for read, write, or execute. So the read placeholder in binary would be the 4, the 2, and the 1, or the 4 for the read, the 2 for the write, and the 1 for the execute. And it's really, you can add these values up. Like if you want read and write, basically you would just add that up to a 6 in the placeholder of user, group, or owner. But if you wanted read, write, and execute, you would do 4 plus 2 plus 1, which would be 7. So that's why it's common to go 777 for a file or directory would basically mean read, write, and execute, where 666 would mean read and write, but no execute for the user, the group, or the owner. And so we'll see these when we go through that. So this is actually closer to what it looks like on the command line when we do our ls-d, for example. And good, the Kali image is up as well, so I'm going to show you guys that. The commands that we'll be using here were LSTAKLF, all right? So let's do a quick reminder. Again, this is just the easiest way to do display the permissions here. So basically this is the piece where it's the user, the group, and the file permissions specifically right here. And then also let me zoom into the terminal a little bit so I can show you guys. All right, so also we'll be doing the who am I. All right, so in this case we're logged in as root, but that wasn't entirely obvious by the root at Kali image than it was. But we're going to be logging in, logging out, so it'll be helpful to come back to who am I. Also, you can do the ID in the groups command. Okay, so if I would just want to do an ID, basically it tells you the user ID, the group ID, and then the groups, what are they set to. Also, you can do the groups command. Okay. And you can see that I'm a member of the root group. Okay, so 3 commands, or was it 3 or 4, right off the bat? 4 commands right off the bat. Looking at our directory permissions, who am I actually logged in as? The ID command, which shows the user ID of the group and then the groups you belong to, and then actual groups command. So we're going to come back and we're going to visit these time and time again. Tommy, is the screen size big enough? You guys need it bigger? Maybe something like that. Better? All right. Well, let's assume it is. All right. So then you've got SUID and SGID, which is the user ID and the group ID. So the user access modes such as SUID, GUID, and the sticky bits to maintain security, right? So represented by an S in the permissions. So if you see a capital S in the permissions, that means something. Okay, so you'll notice here, and I'll do some of this as I have it pretty much right in here. So if I create a file and do, let's say, touch Tommy, okay? So LSTAKLF, you can see I have a file here called Tommy, and you can see that it's read, write, not execute, read, and then read, all represented by a 4, a 2, and a 1, and whether it's present or not. If it's present, you get the letter. If it's not present, then you get a dash. So the group would be the R plus TAC, and then everyone else would be R plus TAC as well. Okay, so you can change these, and we'll see these when we start doing permissions like chmod. So chmod U plus S to whatever the file name is, in this case Tommy, and then LSTAKLF again, and you can see how those sticky bits get set and denoted by a capital S here. In this case, I said to set it for the user portion of that. If I wanted to do it to a group, I could just replace the U with a G and then check it again. All right, so this is by far the easiest way to see if a sticky bit is set or not. I'm going to cover more of that later, just illustrating how to do it now. All right, so sticky bits. This is also can be represented by a T in the permissions. If you want, you can check that out with the capital T. So that would be the equivalent of make dir my directory, and then chmod owner plus T to my directory, and then LSTAKLF, and then you can see that. The permissions here, you can see the lowercase t specified in the directory. Okay, you will need to know the S's and the T, and we're going to come back to that. There's also a way to clear anything set. Okay, so if you want to do a chmod to 0xxx, so this 0 here is really a placeholder. Denoted right here would be 0 and then XXX for read for user, group, and owner, or everyone else. Okay. Also, there's the Umass command, and this is a pretty important command because it changes the way that the system's permissions behave. Okay. And so it's kind of like the easiest way to compare this to was in the Cisco world, where you were to set a subnet mask. You basically can specify, /24, and that equals something in ones and zeros. Well, there's a way to basically universally apply a mask to that, which sets certain routing options. Well, it's kind of the same thing here, except for it being routing options, it's more like file and folder level permission options, and it changes the way that the systems behave on the permissions behave on the system. And I wrote a little note about this here in the pen tester notes. Please note that the benefit of Umask, it puts the operating system in a mode until a reboot. It's added to the shells in the RC file on bash, so it completely changes the way permissions get handled. And one easy way to check that is just to simply do a Umask. Okay, and it'll tell you that the current Umask is set for all users by default is 0022. And the way to think about that is in the exact opposite of the permissions that are set all the way back up in here with these guys here. So it'd be 0, 2, and 2. Or the exact opposite of that way, 0, the exact opposite of 0 here would be 7, so that would be a read, write, and execute for the user, and a 2 and a 2. A 2 would be the equivalent of 6, so that would be read and write, and then read and write in this placeholder here. It's the easiest way to think about that. But you can change that behavior if you want by setting a particular Umask. Not entirely popular, but it can be done. Definitely testable, and definitely should know how to use it, and we're going to explore more of that because you can actually see what the defaults are actually set to when you look at the the etc login desk file or the etc profile. And we'll take a look at those here in a second. Also, we're going to look at using the group to grant access to group members, the group file, and what that does and how to see what members are in what group. And I have a lab here that's written out in the document as well. And so I have plenty of examples of how to use the chmod command and basically the UG. If I didn't say it already, the syntax of it's UGO, a user group and other. And that's the way the Linux permission syntax is actually referred to. So that's the three, the read, write, execute for the U, the read, write, execute for the G, and the read, write, execute for the O, and that's the way that's set. And so we'll see how we can manipulate those when we start doing the chmod. And it's I got plenty of examples of here and how to actually set these. And so let's play around with these a little bit here. So I'm going to strategically move this stuff over here so we can see it, and then come back over here to my Kali image. So I'm going to touch a file, again, I'm going to call it my file, and then let's look at the permissions of this. We're always going to be checking the permissions so you can see the default. Notice I just touched a file, and notice the default permissions here. Okay, again, go back to the Umask, 0, 2, and 2. Actually, that's not entirely correct because it's 2 and 2, and that's set for read and read. So I'll give you a better example out here in a second, but it's by default, it's read and write, read, and then read. Okay, so if I want to change that, I can do a chmod to G, to the group, plus add write to that, and we'll call this my file. All right, and then check your permissions again, and you can see that if you compare those, before it was RWRR, and now it's RWRWR. Okay, so by just simply adding the group, adding write to the group, I told it to add write to the group, and it did, denoted right there. And the group, specifically in this case, would be the root group. Okay, and so you should practice this. Chmod user plus, if I wanted to take away, or let's add execute to my file. Okay, and then check the permissions again, and then you can see it's set to read, write, and execute, read, write, and then read. Now, what if I wanted to take that read away? What would I type? There it is. No, I don't care how you do it, because there's 15 different ways on how you could do this, right? You could do chmod 664 as you suggest to my file right here. Whoops, LF, and you can see read, write, execute, read and read, read, write, read, write, read. It's literally whatever you're comfortable with. I will tell you, you need to be able to translate these universally. If you see a chmod 664, you need to know what that does, what that gets you, which is read plus write, which equals 6, and then read. So if I were to just change this here to 777, right? I basically turned everything on. But if I wanted to set to read only for everybody, what would I type? All right, and then you can see that it's set to read. So I'm more concerned that you know how to translate these and recognize the syntax and do them whatever in all ways actually. Both, Jason, both. You will need to be able to recognize the proper syntax for both. Absolutely. Because they'll give you something like this where, you have to recognize the correct syntax of, which command's actually going to work. So that's why it's worth doing this in kind of beating yourself beating your head against the wall here to figure this out. Group plus read minus write, and then O plus read to my file, and then LSTAKLF here. So in this case, you can set multiples as well. So knowing that correct syntax. So what if I were to change this, and let's take these commas out. Let's say I forget the commas. Okay, it'll tell you, look. And this is where it's good to like beat your head against the wall on purpose here to try to play with different commands to see what it is. So in this case, it pretty much tells you, yeah, I don't recognize what this stuff is or this stuff is because it's not in the proper syntax that it's looking for. All right, so we can set them back this way. Whoops, set them back this way. And see it that way. So it's read, write, read, read, and then, or 7777, set it all to reads. I gotta stop doing that. I can't wait till we get to the alias section. And setting it up to full control. So being able to change it and how to change it back. All right. Also, you can change your ownership here. So right now we're working in the root. Everybody, it's the user root and then the group root. So in the module, let's create some groups here, or let's create some users. So you've got user add. Let's call it Tommy. User add John. User add Jason, user add Chris, okay, and then we're gonna tail the Etsy password file. All right, and you can see that new entries have been added here to the Etsy password file. Tommy, John, Jason, Chris have just been added. So, and in fact, we didn't get any error messages from the Unix input either. So that's how to quickly create a bunch of users. Now let's create a bunch of groups. All right. So you've got group add. Let's call it operations. Group add. I'm going to do a lowercase m on purpose. Marketing, group add, research, group add, nothing, dash executive, group, no, there you go. And then group add, deny, Jason group. Okay. And then what we can do to check for this is we can tail the, we'll do the last 10 lines of the Etsy group file. And you can see the different groups that have been added here. All right, so at this point, all I've done is create a bunch of users, create a bunch of groups. All right, so what we can do here so let's do an LSTAKLF, and let's see who the user and group set for the my file. So in this case, if I want to change the ownership of that, I can do a chown, and then the username, so let's make it for Tommy, and then we'll make it to my file. And now if I do an LSTAKLF, you can see that the primary user is now Tommy and not root any longer. That's a big accomplishment all in itself. Any questions on how I did that? All right, so that's changed the ownership of the user. Then you can change the group if you want as well. So let's change the group. chgrp. We'll look at what the R means here in a second. The username Tommy. And you can still auto-tab through here, by the way. By all stretch of the imagination, I am not typing this out if I don't have to. So you can tab through to your user. If I wanted to do Jason, as soon as it becomes unique, you can tab through. So we'll keep Tommy here. And then we'll make it to my directory. And then LSTAKLF. So there you go. All right. You can also do the new group command as well. Notice there's a little bit of different there. All right. So I did the group add new group name, and then there's new group name too. Well, hold on, I lost my train of thought. Specifically, the new group command changes the group identification. All right, so if you look this up, all right, so let's find out the differences between that. So we could do a manual for a new group, okay, log into a new group, okay, versus, so it says right here, the new group command is used to change the current group ID during a login session. If optional blah 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 are given, the user environment will also recognize these changes. You can see these in the Etsy password, Etsy shadow, which we're going to look to, or even the G shadow files. So it tells you right here the different files that are associated with this command. So that's actually worth noting, right? Etsy password, Etsy shadow, Etsy group, G shadow for secure. G shadow is just for secure groups, and then of course the associated commands here as well. Notice the ID command. Just showed you that today, but you could also do group as well. So let's get out of that, and then manual for group add. Okay, this actually creates a new group where the new group command just logs you into a new group. So there's a big difference here. One is it more of a system administration command for creating groups. That would be the group add command. And then the new group is really just to manipulate your login session while you're logged in. So anything I create here, okay, so I created my file 2 here, okay, by just creating it, and look at the default permissions. You can see that when I did the new group command, new group name 2, now the group gets associated to that. So this is very helpful for role-based access control and simplifying role-based access control settings. Now, unless you have a project in your cubicle for role-based access control, you probably aren't going to be using this every single day. But have you had a project of actually consolidating role-based access control and permissions? No, it's kind of like the default group, Tommy. is a way to think of that. So I could do new group root, okay, and then touch my file 3. Okay, and you can see that my file 3 defaults to root again. But if I do new group marketing, that should have, oh, that's right, I did that lowercase. New group marketing, and then touch my file 4. You can see that the group is set to marketing. So it's kind of like your default group, Tommy. All right. Now you're going to need to know the difference between commands like new group versus, group add. That's definitely testable. Okay. Also, there's a section here on performing security administration tasks here, and some of the different types of things that we would do from a security administrative point of view. And a lot of it has to do with looking at for files and permissions and things like that. So let's explore a few of these. All right. All right. So sudo find / with the permissions of TAC 4000. All right. And this will actually, let's clear the screen and let's take the output and let's call this find _perm _4000 .txt, and then we'll let this run. And the reason why I'm doing this is because instead of it being dumped to the screen, no such file directory, no such file directory, no such file or directory. So if I cat find file permissions 4000, okay, clear it, and then let's add a pipe more, and let's go through this on our terms. That's why I put it to a file first, so that I could now interrogate that file. And I want to point out, okay, let me do that again. Okay, so I did this command here, but let's say, well, no, let's go there. Let's say sudo find / with the permissions of 4000. I also could have added an ampersand to the end of that, or prefix. If I could take off that ampersand, I could also do a BG to the beginning of this command, and that'll send it right to the background. I don't know if I'll do it sudo. Well, here, let's just do it with let's do a background to the end of that. And you can see it executed, and there you still get some terminal feedback, but it basically sends it to the command, to this file, and I get to continue manipulating with the terminal by adding an ampersand to the end. That's classic Linux 101 there. So now if I cat, find file permissions, and then do a pipe more, you can see it. So this would be every file on the system with the permission set of TAC 4000. Kind of a convenient way of doing things. You can also do the same thing if I change the 4000 to a 2000 and then change the output, and we don't need the background. Let that run. You also get a find file, so cat find and then 2, there you go. And the same thing for 2000. All right. You also could send the output to a printer or wherever else if you want. I could redirect this output. I could manipulate standard out, standard in, and standard error and send it to somewhere else like LP0 if you wanted to send it to a printer, or a null device, which basically would take your output. And you guys remember what 2 greater than is in terminal language? Who can answer that for me? What is 2 greater than? Let's see if you guys are faster than me looking it up on Google. Nope, I've already got the answer. Standard error. Good job. Good job, Jason. Right? So you should, don't forget, you got to remember it's 0, 1, and 2, standard out, standard in, standard out, and standard error. So since it's the third one, it's 2. Good job, Jason. All right. So pseudo find permissions. You can look for user IDs. I got a couple different syntaxes of this. I set all of the output in the example to suid.txt, but in the terminal I set it to, what did I set it to? Find permissions 2000.txt. So just name your files accordingly. Either way, it's a it's just the name of a file. All right. All right. All right, so that's the basics here of where we're going with this. Now let's look over here to the other side of the mind map and see something else. So process text stream using filters. And again, I want you to be familiar with all this stuff. Know the tail, know these commands. Know head, tail, more, less. Okay, these are all really, really good, commands to know. So don't forget man head. All right. Outputs the first part of the file. Okay, man tail, output the last part of the file. Specifically with that, you'll use the TAC N for the number of lines you want to output. By default, I believe it actually it says it right here, 10 by default. So it'd be pointless to do a TAC N-10 because that's what the default is. Okay, so that's head, tail, man, more. All right. And then man less, opposite of more. Okay, so we'll be looking at those commands quite frequently. This is standard, Linux behavior with the terminal here. So maintain skeleton directories, new accounts, those different files, terms, utilities. So manage user and group info in the password group databases. So that's basically where we're going with this next piece of that. And I got to scroll down here a little bit so you guys can see this. Manage user and group accounts and related system files. This is where we get to go do some of the fun stuff. All right, so now we're going to do basically the same thing that we just did, except we're going to look at it more from a file point of view. So everything that we just did executed. Now we want to see the effects of that in the files, or what files are stored on the system. So first thing to do is cat the etc pass WD, and notice I tab my way through that, and if I just display the whole thing, basically you have this format here. Now the biggest thing to note here is this placeholder of a lowercase x. If you see a lowercase x here, that means that the password to the user is actually stored in the etc shadow file, not the etc password. So the good news is it's in a secure location. The bad news is everybody knows the secure location. All right. So basically the format of this, the username, okay, so in this case I'll go down here to Chris, okay, the encrypted password or reference. If you see the X, everything is separated by a colon here. If you see an X, that means go to the shadow file. Then it's the user ID, so Chris is user ID 1003, the group ID is 1003. Then you have Gecko's description, which isn't hardly used. The home directory that is set, and I'll show you in a second how to change this, /home/Chris, and then the default shell, and I'll also show you how to change this. You can also do the VIPW command as well, and that is basically the effect of clear a VIPW. So we think of it this way: virtual editor of the password file, and if you do a VIPW and enter, then basically it's like doing a VI to the password file. So all of it, pretty much the same thing, :Q gets us out of there, and it tells us, there it is. So, I'm giving you guys all sorts of really good shortcuts here on how to manipulate and how to navigate, Unix. I mean, I could have also done VI etc pass WD here, and get the same thing, :Q. I could have done that, except there's actually a command for editing the password file. No applause for that, folks? I mean, come on. All right, so next we've got cat the Etsy shadow. And tab your way through that, and you can see what goes on. So you can see very much the same thing. So in this case, notice I see the username. So we'll go with Tommy on this one. The encrypted password or special characters, like here in this case you can see the exclamation, and certain things that you would see would be a star, an exclamation, or a double exclamation. And it'd be very, very good for you guys to figure out what those mean. The date and the time the last password was changed, an attacker would be looking for that. The minimum number of days before the user can change his or her password, the maximum number of days before the user has to change their password, the days before the password expire, the number of days after the password expires before the account is to be disabled, and the date on which the account can be disabled. All of this we are going to edit here in just a second. If you noticed, when I created the users, all I did was inherit the default settings. So in a second, we're going to need to know, well, hey, how do we change the default settings? Okay. Excuse me. Also, before we move on, let's look at some more. Let's cat the Etsy group file. Here you can see the different group names. So I've got, let's say I created Tommy, Jason, Chris, operations, marketing, research, nothing executive, deny Jason group name. Okay, then the if I wanted to set a password for that group, and then the default group ID as well. All right, so to change this, you can do commands like group mod and group delete. All right, so let's do a man group mod, see what that's all about. Okay, modify the group definition on the system. So it's group mod, the options, and then the particular group. So you can change the group ID of a particular group. You can specify the new name of this group if you basically want to rename a group. You can specify a password. Also, you can, there's a utility in Linux called crypt for encrypting these passwords. And I want to point out something here. This is, I just did a man for crypt real quick. This is not really good encryption. And it probably is going to say that somewhere in here. Password and date encryption. Let's see. I should say in here that it's the DES algorithm itself has a few quirks, blah, blah, blah. It's basically, from what I know about it, which I don't really see that it says here. I mean, it does have a note to DES. It does, for those of you who have been in my CISSP class, I mean, it does, there is a note to DES. There's your blowfish algorithm. It's got integrity algorithms like 256 and 512 SHA or just default MD5. But I want you to think about the crypt command more as like an Enigma machine meets very, very cheap crackable encryption. So just because something is encrypted with crypt, that does not mean that it can be decrypted because, well, I guess it depends on how you set it up, like anything, but it's not like just because it's encrypted that means it's super, super strong. Because from what I know about it, it's extremely crackable. All right. So, but there is that command. Anyway, back to group mod command. You can do a capital R, apply changes in the change root directory, and use the configuration files in the change root directory. And then you can change the password. And I think that's all the really important stuff. Also, please note we'll be looking at the Etsy/login.defs, but it actually says that in the file. That this is where actually reading, believe this or not, guys, actually, I don't want to say reading, I want to say kind of researching and using the manual pages sometimes can be the best source of information, because you can see, Etsy group, Etsy G-Shadow, Etsy login defs, Etsy password. These are all the related files on the system, right? So if we wanted to see that, cat Etsy login.defs, right? Or, you can look at that file right there. Actually, that would really wasn't helpful, but you can look at what goes into that file. I mean, very, very, very easily. All right. So let's before I get off track, let's go back to this. All right. So we got Etsy, we got Shadow, we got groups, we got group mod and group delete. Group mod is to modify a group. Group delete is to delete a group. So if we just wanted to pick a group here, group del marketing, and then you can see marketing went bye-bye. All right, so let's delete the deny Jason group. We know Jason will be happy with that. Cat add the Etsy group, and you can see deny Jason group went bye-bye. And don't forget, if anybody was using that group for something, they are now calling you for help. Also, you can see the Etsy scale directory. Okay. All right. What do I want to do with this? All right, so we're not going to have anything in the Etsy skeleton directory as of right now, because what we haven't really done anything with users or group. So the Etsy skeleton directory contains files and directories that are automatically copied over to a new user's home directory when a user account is created by the user add program. In this case, because we haven't actually done anything with the user add other than actually create the user, we haven't moved any files, or there's no files going in between home directories. This directory is empty. So you're going to see that over here if you go to it. So it's helpful to know. You can peek in there from time to time, but that's about it. CHAGE, change the password expiration. This is also a good one to do. So if we kind of move that over here, let's see. All right, well, let's do the manual for this first. Manual, CHAGE. Change the user password or exploratory information. So basically the options that we need in here is the change command, the options, and then the login ID. Change command changes the number of days between the password changes and the date of the last password change. This information is used by the system to determine when a user must change his or her password. So if you've ever been tasked with resetting someone's password or setting up a password policy, or again, dealing with role-based access control, you might actually have to set this. So there's all sorts of options here. You can specify the last date. You can do a capital E and actually specify the expiration date. You can get help. You can set, this is a good command as well for more system administration with a capital I or inactive. Set the number of days of inactivity after a password has expired before the account is locked. We've done a couple different studies on enterprise systems, and you'd be surprised how many user accounts are left basically open to log into, to do whatever their privileges are to that system, but nobody's actually logged into that account for like 2 or 3 years. So you have an account with administrative privileges that nobody has really done anything with at a certain period of time. So what the capital I does is basically says, look, if you're not going to use this account, let's go ahead and disable it. make it inactive. Show capital L is show account aging information. Sometimes you use that. Maximum days. You can warn, set the number of days of a warning before a password change is required. This is also in the warn days option in the password settings. And then also what other files are related to this, or the Etsy password and the Etsy shadow. So when you run chage, basically it changes information in here, and we can look at this. You also can see the defaults of this in the login.defs. So login.defs will be coming up here just shortly, but let's keep running with what we got right now. So as we set this, you can see. So also, change command exists with the following values. 0 is a success, 1 is denied, 2 is invalid, and 15 basically can't find this shadow password file, which hopefully you don't get that one. So, there's lots of ways that you could learn about a command line like this. So I want to point out here, let's say you forget. I mean, you could always use Google as your friend. So if you wanted to know chage, just search for whatever the Linux command is and do example, okay? And that within the first couple, you should get some really good examples of what it is. So, how to install it. We already have it installed. Chage list and then Dinesh, right? So if we wanted to see that, we could see chage list Tommy, all right, and then we can pull all of Tommy's. It's probably not the best option. Can you guys see this? Let me change something here. Desktop system setting. Used to have a button for this. I'm sorry, Mark. What was my question? What is your response? Not all? What does not all mean?
Yeah, you said could we see it, and I can't see all of the screen though.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to make it bigger here. There you go. That should be a little better. Is that correct, Mark?
I didn't see any change to that as far as your Kali screen, the terminal.
Clear. Well, I'm just trying to display a little bit better. So in this case, I've done a chage to tech list out basically details for Tommy, and this is the equivalent of like going to a user account in Active Directory and going to the properties and looking at the general tab. So you can see, when the user account, when their password expires, passwords inactive, account expiration, minimum, maximum number of days between password change. And basically, it's the default policy settings. And you could change this, for whoever you want. So do the same thing for Chris. But again, this is all pulling from the logins.def file, which is where we'd actually set these systematic values. All right, so my point here being is like, hey, it might be a year goes by before you use these commands again. I mean, I don't always use this, but you can get good, simple, instructions here. So like age, tac m, a maximum number of days, and the username. So if you change tac m 10, then the maximum number of days between password change would be set to 10. So I mean that's realistically real easy to do. If I can cheat and do my screen like this, change tac m, we'll make it 100 days, and then we'll do it to JSON. And then you can see how that's different here compared to here. All right, so you can be helpful, you can still be resourceful, especially if you want the syntax of that. So I'm really just kind of maybe pointing out some obvious stuff here, maybe not. All right, next is you got the group add command. You can add the tag G for the group ID, the P for the password. Again, crypt can be used there. You're going to need to know what utility runs, but again, I already told you how I felt about that. It's not really good encryption. And R is for creating system groups. Now, here's something to point out here. Group add has basically two sets of groups, just like Windows has two sets of groups. In Windows, we would call them a system group and a user group and a service group. Is that what it is? Oh, I'm having a brain aneurysm here, trying to think of what's the exact name of it. It's the types of groups that you can create in Windows. System group and a distribution group, which is just for email purposes. Well, here, basically what you can do is you can set just a system group for basically kernels, daemons, or anything that the computer itself needs. You can actually specify a group. I would do something like attack R if I was setting in a group for like Apache to run or MySQL to run. I would actually create a system group for that rather than a user group. All right, so let's play with the group add a little bit more. All right, so let's clear the screen. Group add. Well, I guess let's go see the login.defs first. So let's cat the Etsy login. You got to do logi and then tab login.defs file, and then we'll do this more. And basically it says configuration control definitions for the login packages. 3 items must be defined: mail directory, environmental paths or SU paths, and then environmental paths. If unspecified, some arbitrary and possibly incorrect value will be assumed. Thank you very much for the obvious. Required: user add, user del, user mod. These are like the cousin commands of this. Directory where the mailboxes reside, or the name of a new file in relation to that home directory. If you want to define a mail directory or a mail file, mail directory takes precedence. You could do that. That's a little bit more advanced stuff than right here. So we'll go to the next part of this. This is a temporary situation. Setting these variables will soon move to Etsy default user add, and those variables, this is var mail. That's basically where we actually set the mail directory. And you can tell anything with a pound is commented out. Anything without a pound is basically executed. So in this case, this is actually where we set the mail directory to. The failure log is enabled and set to yes. The log unfail enabled is set to no. You might not use that too often. Okay, logins. Now, this is actually a very important setting, whether you guys may recognize this or not. Most places do not log successful logins. They only log unsuccessful logins. For whatever Tommy, I'll come back to you in just one second. For whatever reason, most people would suggest that it's not worth the log space to see who's successfully accessing their stuff. I kind of disagree. I know it takes more log space, but I'd rather have it because I can correlate much, much better information in a tool like ArcSight or something like that if I'm actually looking at successes and failures as opposed to just failures. Tommy asked a question. Why is it TAC list instead of TAC list? Well, that's an easy one here. If we go back to the manual, you can either do a TAC-L or a TAC list as the exact syntax, Tommy. So that's where it's going to actually look for. And you know, lowercase m is for minimum days, capital M is for maximum. It's easy to think of this in terms of size because, you know, the min would be the small and the max would be the large. So, you know, a little Linux humor there. You know, that's all that right there. Okay. All right. So let's see where I was. Login.defs. Syslog, if that's enabled, TTY type, there you go. Environmental path. So notice the path is set to basic. Well, here are all the basic paths. These are what we would call environmental variables in Windows. So it's basically what are our default directories and how do we know, how does the terminal know where to automatically find stuff, like Etsy, directory versus user bin versus user local games or something like that. So that's where those get set. The default Umask prefix these values with an O to get an octal or 0x for hexadecimal. That just determines the value here so you can see O. Password max days is 999. Password minimum days is 0. Password warning age is 7. The number of login retries. So here's a good way to point out. On a government system, we would basically have default values and settings of these, which would come to us in the format of a STIG or a standard technical implementation guideline. And so we would just have to set whatever is in the guidance documents to this and set it and kind of forget it. And in some cases, you actually can get templates of the file. So login timeout. Here's a good one. CHFN restrictions. Okay. Default home directory if you want to use one or not. Okay. A console. Default consoles that are defined if you want to define them or now. MD5 encryption enabled. SHA crypt. All right. Other settings in here, message of the day file, dial-ups, last log if it's enabled, password change, how many tries, password warning, password minimum length, maximum length. I mean, all sorts of good stuff, man. This is a good file. I mean, this login.defs file is probably, you know, what I would consider the equivalent of like setting group policy type information on a system. Security technical implementation guides can be found at the IASE.mil for those of you who want to download and view. Most of them can be downloaded without PKI authentication. That is also an accurate note, as Jason points out. Get used to them. If you haven't seen a STIG or a NIST 800 series guidance document, you might want to check those out because you're going to need them sooner than later. Not required, but still lots of good information. And I'm cheating in the background here. I'm trying to look for a quick how-to guide on this, except I found one in French. I'm basically looking for a template, and I know there's, so here's kind of, this isn't the exact same thing Jason and I were just talking about, but it's kind of out there. So basically it goes through and it'll tell you, you know, the minimum, it templates this stuff out in ways that, you know, you can see, well, one, what are the defaults, and then two, well, for secure systems, what are the settings of those? So you can find these types of documents. And basically I just said Etsy login defs file type PDF, and I was actually looking for a template to see if we could get, you know, something with you know, the parameters, or just trying to see if we could find these. But I'm not going to waste your time here goofing on that. I know that they're out there, and there's other things other than the government STIGs or the NIST 800 series documents. But you know, if I find stuff, I'll email them out to the group. All right, so know the Etsy login.defs. For those of you who've already taken this class and you're coming in, you know, this is where I'd want you to start testing this stuff out. You know, for once, the first time that you heard this, you know that it exists, and now it should be the point where you should be manipulating some of these parameters and then testing them out. And, you know, set a couple parameters, log in, log out, see if you can change your password, see if, you know, after 5 days, what happens to your password. Start testing these values out. Right? That's how you get the hands-on experience with, you know, knowing what they do. And then we'll get ready. I got a couple more here, and then we can take a quick break. So let's do. Actually, we're right in the middle. So, well, here I'll just do a couple more real quick, and then we'll take a break. So, all right. So, group add, new group add. Okay, so you can see the new group add right there. So that's adding a group, clear, and then group del, new group. I think, no, what did I call it? New group add. There you go. And then you can see it went bye-bye. All right. Clear. Next, let's do a pass WD for Chris. Okay. Enter the new Unix password. We're going to call it Chris. Password successfully updated. So now let's cat the Etsy pass WD file, and Chris, all you have is a reference to that, so that's not going to help. And then let's change that to the shadow. And now you can see Chris has a password set, which is capital Chris. Capital C in Chris. All right, so that's how to do a password. It's basically the password and username, and it basically walks you through a prompt. You've already seen the user add username, and then also add user versus user add. So let's go figure out the difference between these two, and then we'll take our 8 o'clock break. So let's do a manual for user add. create a new user or update default user information. Okay, so user add, the options, and then the login name. So it assumes that you actually have some sort of naming convention or things like that. User add D. Description, user add is a low-level utility for adding users. On Debian, administrators should use the add user command. Okay, so it does reference these two right back to back actually in the help files. And I lost my spot. All right, so let's go down here. You can specify a base directory that you want to. That would also be the login.defs file. You can specify comments for the users. However, it does not like spaces. I'll show you how to address that in a second. Basically, just adds quotes or delimiters. D for a home directory. D for defaults. Change the default values. E for expiration date. F for inactive. All right, and then G for group ID, capital G for groups. This is where you add it to multiple groups. We're going to do that one. And then H, okay, you got to know some of these. So let's play with a few of these. Okay, so let's do TAC D and then the home directory. All right, let's say I user had TAC H for home directory, and let's call it home Chris2, and for the user account Chris, and I goofed up. What I taught H. Actually, I did not want H. I wanted D. Let's try it again. H is for help. There you go. So that was dumb. So that's actually, let's do it. Create another account called Chris CTR. Make a Chris a contractor. And then let's look at cat Etsy groups. Group. Okay, and then wait, I lost myself here. Oh, I wanted wrong command. Hopefully it's not too many commands back. Oh, it's Chris Tech CTR. There we go. That's not the command I wanted. I wanted to see the group. Let's see. I only see 10, 11 there. That's not what I wanted. I completely forgot what I was doing. So that means it's time to take a break. I have to think about that in my head a little bit, and we'll come back in 10 minutes, and then I'll figure out what the heck I was trying to do. So that's a great indicator. You added a user, not a group. And I wanted to see the home directory for that user. So what command did I just do? See the home directory. Yeah, I wanted to, when I created a new user, Chris Contractor, I wanted to see the home directory for that particular user, and then my thought process went into the group mode, not into the user. So you're right, that's where I went wrong. So while we take a break, let's have a little contest. What command should I type to review what, how to see what the home directory is set for a user? I'll give you guys 10 minutes to see what that command is, and then I'll come back and I'll show you. But that's basically where my head was at before I lost track of myself. All right, 10 minutes. So yes, cat the password file, and you can see the user's home directory here, and actually I have to specify that. So we were comparing the user add command to the add user command, manual for add user command. It's actually USER. Add user and add group. Add a user or group to the system. Add user, then the options, and then you can see how that differs. You should know both of these commands. All right, so you want to disable the password. You want to disable the login. That's a quick way of disabling the account. And so there you go. Very much the same commands, but slightly different. All right, so that's how we got that. Now let's go down to deleting a group. That's an easy one. It's just group del group name. To change a group, okay, group mod n, new group name, and then the old group name changes the default groups for that user, for that group. Pass WD, change a password, and then the syntax for that actually should be a red, and then the add user and all of the things that go into that. So here I've got the adduser.conf file. That's an easy one to check. So cat Etsy all right, and so if you want to see what's in this file here, you can see set the group directory to no, don't set that, set a quota. We have a whole module on that later. Extra groups for multiple groups, etc., etc., etc. So that's basically the default. And the Etsy /adduser.configuration file. And so, D is for home directory, not H. H is for help. E is set an expiration date. G is for group ID. P is for password. S is to set a different shell for the user if you want to change it from like bash to cache or something like that. K, your login.defs file, which is the default location for email, the password expiration, the minimum password length, and the range of available user IDs and group IDs, and then the home directory defaults in the login.defs file. Or you can specify when you create the command as I just showed you. And then there's the Etsy default add user user add command, which specifies the primary group, etc., etc., etc. And then the Etsy.scale. Notice there's a lot of hidden files here. You'll see this. So in the Etsy.profile, let's look at Etsy.profile. Cat Etsy profile. And then you might need to scroll back up here. This is a system-wide .profile, which means hidden, for the Bourne shell and compatible shells, a bash, cache, ash, etc. And basically it goes through and it says, if basically the shell is set, then if, else, etc., do this, do that. Also, there's a comment about the Umask command and how you can specify the Umask in the login.defs file, etc. Then the user del command, user delete, tac R for remove, username. So if we wanted to delete user del R Chris C TR, basically we delete that. Now, since the user hasn't logged in yet, there is no mail, there is no home directory. Those files haven't been created because they would have only been created after the user logs in. And then also chfn command is a very, very good command to know as well. This is definitely testable in this respect. So chfn, so if we do for Chris, enter the full name, Chris, first name, room number, Chris's room number, Chris's work number, Chris home number, Chris other number, etc., etc., etc. And then cat the Etsy password file after that, and you can see Chris, shadow reference, the Chris first name, Chris's room number, Chris work, Chris home, Chris's, etc., 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 etc. And then finger command, which typically is installed anymore, so you'd have to get this. So it's apt-get install finger. And it's only take a second to install it. Finger's not entirely. It was really used for terminal access. So you have to install it if you need it, but it's still quite referenceable in the Linux world. So it's definitely a command you guys should know about. So we'll give this a second. So we'll let this run here. And that should install. I believe I'm connected to the internet. Finger. Yeah, no, it went out, found it. One newly installed. So it's just going to take a second for itself to see it. So this basically will display changes from the chfn command as well. Then the last little piece of this, we'll wait for finger to install and I'll come back to that. The finger's a very, very basic command. Well, other system administration tasks, files, terms, utilities, basically pass WD, ch age, or change age, and then sudo. We already talked about this, but if you want to see that, you can see that in the var auth log. So here, this finger looks like it installed, so let's do a finger real quick. And basically you can see who's logged in to the terminal sessions. In this case, Chris is not logged in. So, but if you did set an office or an office phone number and that user was actually logged in, you would actually see that. All right. So let's go over to var auth log. Cat the var authentication var log auth log. What was it? Var log auth log. Var log, that makes much more sense. And you can see the last changes in here. So this is a great place to go to see what has been changed on the system, but this is the authentication piece. So you can see, Chris in here. So if I wanted to grep that for Chris, just give me the lines there with Chris in them, and you basically can see all of the entries that have Chris. And so basically all I did was grep the authentication log for all entries with Chris, and it'll bring up Chris CTR. And if I actually wanted to do just CTR real quick, I just do that. And you can see all the Chris CTR. And then we could also do color, change that, put that in color again, and it'll show us all the coloring. Remember we learned TAC color last week? So it just displays, the Chris CTR in color, or search results in color, which is helpful. So you'll use that command, and we've talked about etc sudoers file, or switch user mod. And that's pretty much it in the mind map in itself. So that's the high-level overview. Now let's switch over to go in here, and let's see what we've missed in the document here. And then this will be an easier module for tonight. So we did change mod. I give you plenty of examples of this to play around with. Change ownership. All right. Change group, new group, how to find things, how to tail certain files, or even catting them, but you could also tail them. Some other hands-on, looking at the etc password file, looking at the etc shadow file, etc group file, the different commands, looking at the login.desc file, CHFN, finger. You notice this is all stuff that we've just done right in the mind map here. So other hands-on, sudoers, and that's it. So the only other thing that I have in this activity here is I give you guys a scenario where I've got different groups and different users, and then different permissions to different folders that I want you guys to set. So you can try setting this. It's basically, I want you guys to get familiar with creating users, creating groups, and then adding the permissions to the files. So I have a little role-based access control matrix for you guys to play around with. Otherwise, the step-by-step or the hands-on, UMI, ID groups, finger, manipulate permissions. I separated these into user add, mod, and delete. Change the owner, modify, group, age, CHFN, the Umass, the group add, mod, delete, and then pass WD. And then the files that we've covered here are basically etc password shadow, group skeleton, add user default, and then sudoers, which we actually covered that last time. All right, so for 100% pass rate, work with the command line to get the point with the commands where you don't have to keep looking up what they do. This is the level of mastery expected to pass these Linux exams. Also, things that are helpful in this, as I'm sure any CISSP will understand. Eric, I don't have that document. What document don't you have, Eric? Is it the system, this one right here, the one I'm looking at, system admin tasks? Yeah, this is, I did add that to the Dropbox account. Can you just double check that? Should be there. And then let me know. Otherwise, other topics that typically fall into this, in the big picture of these, separation of duties. I work the fries, you work the grill. I work in marketing, you work in research. Or the bank teller versus bank manager concept. Also, rotation of duties is similar to separation of duties, which is, today I work the fries, tomorrow you work the fries. Split knowledge, I only have half of the password file, you have the other half of the password file. All right, so no person has the keys to the castle. Also, there's the concept of DAPE, deny all permit exceptions. So in the permissions of something, everybody should have a deny all specifically with that, or basically we call that an implied deny or implicit deny. And then the concept of least privileges, you only want to give access to the things that you need and no more. All right, so I got the mind map in here, and now it's time for you guys to go ahead and practice these. And I've got a nice little write-up here of things that you should think about, which is in the pen tester's notebook here. Because I go over, next steps to master, things like non-repudiation, access control, confidentiality, privacy, what do I look for as a pen tester? Do they have things like BIOS passwords to the system, disabling boot for removable media? Are there password protected hard drives or mount points? Do they have any sort of key access control in place? And then I added in some specific commands here that are helpful with this lesson. All right, so now let's go into questions. What can I answer? This is basic system admin stuff 101, particularly with users and groups. Also from a red teaming, blue teaming perspective, red teaming is offensive, blue teaming is defensive. And when you have competitions for this type of stuff, you got one person trying to break into a system and account and enumerate shares, and another person trying to lock people out and harden the system at the exact same time. Thanks, Mark. Or wait a second. Okay, Eric, you got it. Okay, Eric. So as quickly as one person can attack a system and enumerate this stuff, the defensive people are trying to secure and lock other people out. All right, other types of things that are helpful here. Now, I just did a quick search on Linux enumeration commands. All right, so this was kind of like where my mindset as a pen tester goes in. And the first one that just comes up is the escalation cheat sheet, which is really, really nice. Somebody put together. So, we could go through some of these things. So I'm just going to kind of clear the screen here and go through a few of these, give you guys a few more minutes of extra bonus stuff here. So let's clear the screen. Let's do a uname A. In this case, this is an enumeration command for printing all available system information, okay? Or uname tac R. Okay, or uname tac n, this prints the system host name, or you can just do a host name to do that. Or cat, the proc version right here. It's another way to get really good reconnaissance detail information. Cat etc / tac release. Okay. This is another way to find information on a Linux system. So you can see home URL, support, bugs, the ID. If you were going to set your own blend, you would always set these. Or cat the etc issue. It tells you GNU Linux 1.0. Or cat the processes CPU info. Right? It's kind of like looking at the task manager a little bit. And you can get information about that, or clear, or DFA. This is a good little shortcut here. Or let's see. Here's a good one. Here's a real good one. grep tac v tac e quote greater than # etc pass wd and then print the first name single tick $3 is equal to 0 print $1. That was a whole lot just to tell me what I already knew. This lists all the super user accounts. This is good. Right? Finger tells you the finger command, who's logged in. Again, we had to install that. Oh, finger. I don't think is Pinky. Ah, Pinky's installed. So I wonder if this is like the new replacement for finger. You have finger and then Pinky. You gotta love Unix. You can do the users command as well. That tells you who's logged in at each terminal, or who, kind of like a who am I, or a W, which is the short way of a who. Also, that tells you the terminal session here, so that gives you good recon. Last log tells you who's last logged in. This is a good one. This is kind of helpful that we're going to do this. Never logged in, never logged in, never logged in, never logged in. Or last log TACU percent username percent using a variable. And this doesn't tell me anything. Whoops. Well, let's spell it right. Last log TACU percent username percent. Yeah. It's supposed to give me the usernames. So this is good. I like this little list here. Echo $path tells you your default path. History, and tells you what history's been done. Cat the Etsy profile. This is good. This is good. Oh wow. Notice here, this is right up our alley here, because notice the exact command here. So somebody has aligned this specifically with Linux Plus as well. I can tell you that simply because of these exact commands right here. Find, world writable directories, world readable, world writable. Some good examples of this. Oh, LSOF file. View services are running. So as we do system administration, what the attacker's doing is basically doing enumeration. Exactly, Jason, you got that, end quote. So on how to do network and routing, programs installed, how to do command shell. So this is a really good directory, a link right here. So I'm going to put this actually in the pen testers notes. And we'll just give the credit to the users who've done this. So this would kind of be like the countermeasure, sort of, if you want to call it that. I probably should have left it. There you go. So I got a nice little link in there for you on how to enumerate this stuff. So that's nice, because what you get here is the kind of the attacker's point of view plus the system administrator's point of view. Maybe we could throw in a little forensics twist to this as well. All of that would be very helpful. So I'll save that as version 2. All right. So what else can we do? Any questions? This is nice because we got through a whole module tonight in review, and I want you guys to start practicing this stuff. So this is where you rinse and repeat. Any questions? Going once. All right, guys. That's module 4 for tonight. We're going to do Module 5 on Thursday, and then we'll get into Module 6. I should have the Module 5 information out here probably tomorrow. All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks for a great night. I'll see you guys on Thursday.